I'll jump into this because I know you've got things to do today, but we do appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. Now that you've had time to reflect on your decision, what are you feeling today?
I feel mixed feelings. Certainly excitement at what the next chapter of my career will hold, but also a bit of melancholy leaving this team, this wonderful group of women and men who I've had the privilege of working with, and many of the commissioners that I've had the pleasure of working for over the last 8 years. These are good people, and they'll certainly be missed.
Help me walk through the timeline. How long have you been thinking about leaving your position here with the port?
Mike, these are temporary jobs. We're all temporary stewards of these great assets that we oversee. And being here for 8 years and seeing the tremendous growth and the tremendous progress that we've been able to achieve has been truly gratifying for me, and certainly to watch this team that I've assembled blossom into the high performance group of professionals that they are. That's been one of my most gratifying achievements. But earlier this year, I started thinking it might be a good time for me to step away and continue on my journey in another capacity. And so I started talking to Chairman Zahn about it some months back, and we finally got a little more traction just a few weeks ago, and we were able to reach what I think is a very fair agreement, a mutual agreement. And so here we are.
We'll talk more about that in just a moment, but let me clarify here. Did you go into yesterday's Port Commission meeting with the intent of resigning?
That certainly was a possibility that I knew existed. I think there's a few different camps within the commission, some of which who are certainly supportive of me and what I want to do. There are also those who I think didn't want me to leave. So I think there was also some attempts to see if I would reconsider. But I had come to the decision and had made peace with that decision that it was time. So yes, I fully expected that this would be the outcome.
Describe your relationship with the Port Commission. I know yesterday in saying farewell, you tried to address each one personally. As a group, how has your relationship been?
Well, I've served many different commissions over my 8 years. As you know, the composition of the commission changes with the political appointments. And so all of the commissions that I've served and the commissioners that I've served have had an impact and an influence on me. Some have been more supportive than others. There have been times where we have not been in full agreement, but that's all part of the process that's called governance and management, of which they're responsible for the governance. I and the team are responsible for the management. And sometimes that can be, that can put the two camps at odds. But on balance, overall, I have really had the great support of the commission, both existing and previous commissions. And I've served pretty much under the chairmanship of Charlie Zahn, who has, I think, done yeoman's work when it comes to managing the commission and providing the support that this staff needs to do the great work that they've been doing.
Let's dive into some other questions in light of what's come out maybe in recent days, or at least what's been reported in recent days. There have been reports in the media regarding extravagant spending by you, perhaps others associated with the port. Let me ask first, did that influence your decision yesterday in any way?
Not at all.
Give me an idea about the accuracy of the reports that are out there now.
Well, first, understanding that we are a economic development agency, and the constituents, the business constituents that we deal with are at the highest levels of organizations, Fortune 500 companies, and we're talking about C-level executives. So when you're meeting with C-level executives, it's important to have that undivided attention from them, and that usually happens over dinner or lunch or a round of golf. That doesn't typically happen in a booth at Whataburger, as much as I love Whataburger. So, extravagance is certainly in the eye of the beholder. What I will say is every expense, without exception, to my knowledge, has been compliant with port policy, with review processes, certainly with state statute, has been approved by the audit committee chair. So to my knowledge, there have been no expenses that have been out of compliance with the port's policies and best practices. Now, if there have been, I'm certainly glad to repay the port if there were any expenses that were out of policy. But to my knowledge and to the knowledge of our financial staff, there have been no expenses that are out of compliance with port policy.
Do you have a sense that the port commissioners agree with that?
Well, there's certainly one commissioner who's been extremely vocal in criticizing my expenses and certainly the expenses of staff. But understanding that we have visitors from all over the world that come to Corpus Christi to do business with the Port of Corpus Christi. And if you're going to take them to lunch, there's not a lot of options in downtown Corpus Christi that create a venue by which we can host these out-of-town or out-of-country guests. The Yacht Club provides one such opportunity, as does the Country Club. If we had more options in this town, then perhaps we wouldn't need the Yacht Club or the Country Club as venues to host these out-of-town guests, many of which are decision makers, making millions, if not billions of dollars of financial investment decisions that we want for their investments to be right here in the Corpus Christi Coastal Bend area. So it's all in the eye of the beholder, and I understand to perhaps the average citizen on the street, some of those may look extravagant, but I assure you and I assure the public that we are strong stewards of our financial resources here, and we have all the checks and balances in place to ensure that we are compliant with policy and compliant with state law.
Let's talk about, as much as you're willing to, your separation agreement with the port. If the reports are to be believed, you're going to be paid for the next 2.5 years. You get the company car and a significant amount of cash. Now, again, I don't know how accurate any of that is, and you can certainly speak to that. But beyond that, can you understand why this looks more like a mutually agreed decision that it's your time to leave rather than a voluntary resignation? And taking that a step further, is that really what happened here?
Well, I'm not at liberty to discuss the particulars of the separation agreement. But when you have an agreement, of course you have to have mutual concurrence. So it is a mutually agreed decision for me to leave. And that is included, there is certainly precepts in the separation agreement that recognize my contribution during my 8 years. And I'm grateful for the commissioners that voted in support of that separation agreement. So that's really all I can say about that.
Had you not resigned yesterday, do you think port commissioners may have made a strong move toward making that happen?
In terms of, you mean
in terms of
forcing my departure?
Yeah.
I do not believe that there would have been the votes needed to force a departure. This is a mutual agreement that's been a long time being discussed by me and the chairman.
I know the port has gained a much more hefty standing in the world during your tenure. That can't be denied. So what are you going to miss most about this job?
Well, certainly with all the growth that we've experienced and all the opportunities that are still presenting themselves to the port, pursuing those opportunities, securing those opportunities, creating more jobs, creating more tax revenues for our local governments, creating more prosperity for our region, that's certainly something that I am going to miss from this role. But the thing that I'm going to miss the most, Mike, is the people here at the Port of Corpus Christi. They're our most valuable asset, and these are hard-working women and men who have a dedication and a commitment to excellence, and they lay it on the line every day. And the fact that I was able to tell their story and be in a position to support them and give them all the resources they need is truly a privilege for me. And I am grateful for that opportunity and will always be grateful for that opportunity and for their support.
You, in fact, became emotional yesterday in saying that you were going to miss your staff. I imagine you have garnered and have built some deep relationships with people here.
Sure, not only within the organization, those relationships have truly been valued, but relationships with members of the community, business leaders, community activists, environmentalists, and just great citizens in this community. So I'm not planning on going anywhere anytime soon. I do have a home here that I plan to keep, and I do love Texas. So I suspect you may see me again in the state in some other capacity. But right now, I'm going to take a little time off. I'm going to spend some time with my family. And I might travel a little bit, and then we'll figure out what my next steps are.
You mentioned earlier opportunities. One in particular, how does your departure at this moment affect plans to build a desal plant, for example, here in Corpus Christi in this area?
Well, I hope that my departure does not in any way inhibit or create obstacles for desalination. Desalination is certainly needed and necessary if we're going to continue that trajectory of growth. The two issues that we have in this community from an economic development standpoint are water and power. We need to have water security and we need to have more power availability for the region if we're going to continue to grow. So what I would encourage is the staff, the commission, and certainly the community leaders to continue on in my absence in pushing for those resources to be realized. Because if not, we will have significant obstacles and it will be very difficult to overcome them if we want to keep what has been termed the economic miracle to continue.
A couple more questions here. An accomplishment that you're most proud of in your time here on the port?
Well, there were some wonderful projects that we were able to secure and deliver. Most notably, the deepening and widening of the Corpus Christi ship channel. That was a project that had been 30 years in the making. And it took a lot of effort and a lot of time in Washington, D.C. to secure the funding and the support by the federal government for that project. But we were able to secure that. And the result now is that project will be completed sometime next year. And that's a great benefit for the port, for its customers, and certainly for the community. I think some of the other projects that we were able to accomplish that I'm proud of, the Hillcrest voluntary acquisition and relocation program, putting people in better positions of prosperity. That is a program that I'm truly proud of. Certainly not a perfect program, but I think on average, that was a great program and a model of success by which other communities can emulate. But what I'm going to miss most is, again, the people that I had the privilege of working with every day in this building and around this port complex. The people that work for the port, our customers, our stakeholders, and certainly members of the community.
Anything come to mind immediately that you wish during your tenure had turned out better?
You know, hindsight's always 20/20. I probably could have done a better job of engaging the community when it came to some of these larger projects and communicating with the community. So the result of that is I'm encouraging the port to establish what I'm terming a community advisory board, where we will invite members of the community, leaders in the social justice community, in the environmental justice community, in the business community at large, to come to the table and let us share with them what our ideas are, what our visions are, what our project profiles are, and solicit their feedback. Because we need to make sure that everybody has a seat at the table and everybody's voice is heard. The people that we want are the people that have open minds to what we're doing. Unfortunately, there are certain constituents in town that are against anything that the port does. That's not necessarily the constituency that we're looking to engage. We're looking to engage the constituency that wants to learn, wants to better understand and wants to share in their ideas that we can incorporate into our projects. So as I go out the door, that will certainly be something that I'll continue to encourage the commission and staff to stand up, this community advisory board. I wish that I had done that earlier in my tenure, because I think it probably would have yielded results that would have avoided some of the consternation that we've seen with some of the projects that we've engaged in.
When is your final day on the job?
My final day is Friday, June 2nd. So I've got a couple weeks left, and there's a couple things that I need to just button up before I leave here and get to spend the next couple weeks with this fine group of people and say my appropriate goodbyes to our customers and assure them that in the wake of my departure, everything's going to be just fine at the Port of Corpus Christi.
You alluded to this. What does the immediate future look like for Sean Strawbridge?
Somewhere on a beach with an adult beverage in my hand, getting some sun and recharging my batteries.
Perfect. Anything else you want to add to any of this?
I think we covered everything, don't you, Mike?
I do. Thank you for your time, Sean.
Thank you, Mike. Always good to see you.
Appreciate it.
You bet.